Hello and welcome to Hocus Focus. My name's Sara Mondaini
And I'm Thomas Sheridan.
and we hope you've had a wonderful new year and it's great to have you back with us. And as you can see, we've got a brand new look to the show with a much more professional looking production. And I've been busy working on this during the break, always learning, always improving to keep things visually fresh for you. And I've had a quiet Yuletide and a happy new year. And last week it was my birthday, but now it's time to get back into the workflow and back into Hocus Focus again. And we're only a few weeks into the new year and the high strangeness has already been off the scale. What can I say? Miami shopping malls, ZZ Top conventions and jellyfish are just a few. And Thomas, it's good to see you. And I've really been enjoying the new series of car vlogs, which help keep us grounded as we go through this madness. And what a time to be alive. So how have you been since we last got together for the show?
Well, same as yourself, it's been quiet since the Christmas event, the Christmas Hocus Focus, and I've been keeping kind of lazy. I've been a bit lazy, actually, to be honest with you. I haven't really been doing anything productive, but that's okay. It's the winter months, it's cold, and whatever. I can make up for it, now from this point on.
Well, Hocus Focus is celebrating its first birthday and we've come full circle and we've got a jam-packed episode tonight, so let's get straight into it. And our first topic tonight is one that takes us back into the arena of ghosts and entities, and that is the strange connection between paranormal activity and water, or bodies of water. And it's a topic that's fascinated both myself and Thomas, and we also cover aspects of this in our upcoming book. And there's several factors to consider in the relation to this topic, and I'll go into a few in more detail now. And one important aspect to consider is atmospheric conditions. Now, paranormal investigators have found that paranormal activity tends to increase in areas with high static electricity, especially during winter or near bodies of water, since these atmospheric conditions can lead to the build-up of static electricity in the air, and water is a conductor of electricity. And it's that increased static charge that they say might create the environment where entities find it easier to manifest. Now, it takes a lot of energy for a spirit to manifest, and if they are attracted to places where there's a lot of static electricity, such as water, then perhaps the reason for that is because it's sustenance to them in the spirit planes, like food is to us on the physical planes. And extreme weather conditions, such as lightning strikes, have also been linked to increased paranormal sightings. And lightning is another form, although much greater, it's another form of static electricity. And it's got a tremendous energy release that could charge a spirit to enable it to manifest. And the energy from lightning can actually power a light bulb for months. So is it really so far-fetched to think that this massive energy discharge couldn't power a spiritual entity or a ghost? And another reason for increased paranormal activity around water is the idea of water memory. Now, water has the ability to retain information, and so disturbances in the water or water agitation can release stored energy into the atmosphere, which can amount to paranormal phenomena. So, for instance, with stagnant water trapped inside the walls of an old building, it may hold memories of past events. And so, when things such as renovations disrupt the building and therefore the water, it could release that trapped water stored energy and replay its experiences into the atmosphere. And that's what the stone tape theory is based on. And there was a paranormal researcher called T.C. Lethbridge, and he said that past events can be stored in objects because of fields of energy that he believed to surround streams, forests, or mountains. And the stone tape theory believes that ghosts and hauntings are like tape recordings, and that mental impressions during emotional or traumatic events can be projected into the form of energy recorded onto the rocks and other items, and then they're replayed under certain conditions. Some cultures believe that water has the ability to trap souls. And if this is true, it could actually be a possible explanation as to why the Titanic wreckage is regarded as creepy and even cursed, as Christian Morris suggests. And he said in his show that he believed the wreckage shouldn't be visited by the living. And recently, I watched a movie about the kami, which are the spirits of the Japanese Shinto, and they believe that everything in nature has a spirit. And I also believe that, and I wonder whether the wreckage is being protected by a spirit of the water or the sea, or maybe it could be something more malign that has claimed the wreckage as its own property now and doesn't want it disturbed by the living. And then in the Truk Lagoon in Micronesia, there's a wreckage of 40 Japanese ships and 25 American aircraft that went down in its waters during Operation Hailstone, which was a World War II battle. And the underwater scene there is said to be, or described as, a massive ship graveyard. And the photos of the old wreckage, which I will put on the screen, are a reminder of all the lives that were lost in that battle. And that got me thinking again to the possibility that there is some kind of water spirit or entity that will be guarding this, or that it's claimed it as its own property. And it could very well be feeding off that water memory of that tragedy. Now, these ideas are all my Fortean mind, open to all possibilities. I'm not claiming it to be true, I'm just saying it's a possibility. And water may simply be an amplifier of paranormal activity rather than its source, just kind of magnifying the energy present in a given location. And it also might be perceived as a portal to other realms, which could give an explanation for things like Nessie, the Mothman, the Dover Demon, and the Sandown Clown. And we've covered these topics in previous episodes and also in our book, but just to quickly recap with the Sandown Clown, it was in the spring of 1973 at Lake Common near the holiday resort of Sandown on the Isle of Wight, which is off the south coast of England. And there were two young children playing when they heard a strange noise like a loud siren from an ambulance. So they followed the sound around and it led them towards a nearby stream where they were greeted by a strange-looking being which became known as the Sandown Clown. The figure was over 6 feet tall. It had a completely spherical head and it was totally disproportionate to its slender body, and its face was painted with blue triangular eyes and a flat brown nose and an oval-shaped mouth that remained still when it spoke. And it greeted the children in a very gentle and friendly manner, and it talked to them for nearly half an hour. And it had this microphone that it used to talk to the children so it could understand them in English. Now, it would not be unusual for a spiritual entity to use water as a portal into this world from its own and back again. And the same just might apply to the Sandown Clown, who might have used a similar method for interdimensional travel from its own world into this reality. So it's not so far-fetched really to consider water creating a portal into another realm and states of consciousness, because after all, seers use it to divine, and when you divinate, you do enter into other states of consciousness. No matter how subtle that might be, how many times in your own life have you had a relaxing bath and you found yourself in another state of consciousness where insights and ideas fly into the conscious mind? And the alpha state is another state of consciousness. Okay, we call it daydreaming, but it's not your average waking state of consciousness, which would be the beta state. And of course, to finish my thoughts on this, no discussion of paranormal activity around water would be complete without including the Bermuda Triangle, where many aeroplanes and ships have entered the 500,000 square mile parameter in perfectly good weather without the slightest hint of engine malfunction, only to disappear forever. So really there's two aspects to this overall topic. We have increased paranormal activity around bodies of water, and then there are also bodies of water that are said to actually be haunted. So what are your thoughts on all of that?
Well, I go back and forth on it. For the longest time, I had this belief that actual bodies of water themselves, whether they be ponds, rivers, whatever, were sentient in and of themselves. They actually had their own spirit, and this was why our ancestors named gods and goddesses, particularly here in Ireland, goddesses after rivers and so on. And this mainly fermented in my consciousness as a result of an experience I had when I lived in America. I was walking along a deep forested area one time in early spring, and there was still quite a lot of frost around and ice. And I almost fell into a pond deep in the middle of an old growth woods where it almost drowned me. I was almost done. I was very lucky I didn't go down by hypothermia, and I felt the thing was eating me. It was like trying to consume me. There was leaves, there was boulders around the edge of the pond. It was quite sizable too, in the middle of the woods, and they were the rotting leaves from the previous fall or autumn were covering and hiding the icy surface on the boulder. And I slipped, and if it wasn't for a sumac tree that I was able to grab onto as I was going down, I'm sure I would have went into the water. And I very much got the impression that this thing was trying to consume me, that it was a plan, like it set a trap, like a snare almost, for the procuring of nutrients for the pond, be it a person or a deer or another large animal walking by. But in recent times, I've started to think differently about that rather than now I'm not saying this is what I agree with now, it's just another thing that came into my field of view. In John Michael Greer's book on monsters, he talks about how bodies of water contain the dead, the souls or the energy or the consciousness of people that drown there. And they're the ones who lure people into the water to be drowned because they want company, basically. So that made me think completely different all about it, that there could be spiritual entities in the water that are luring us in rather than the body of water itself procuring nutrients by feeding it, making us trip or fall in or drown or caught in reeds when we're swimming. That's an interesting one. Bringing the ontological aspect into this, there was a public service advertisement in England in the 70s and early 80s, I am the spirit of the dark and lonely water, where it had like this Grim Reaper type character in a pond and all children drowning or falling in, and it warning people, I'll be back, I am the spirit of dark and lonely waters. Terrifying stuff when you're a little kid. It absolutely worked on me. And that's probably what was in my consciousness when I had that near accident on that pond. So I go back and forth on both. It could be a mixture of, both. It could be the water sentient, and inside that are spiritual inhabitants who are looking for company.
It's interesting, and it would make sense with the Titanic then why when you try to go down there to visit, it's not a good thing and it doesn't feel very good, because it could still be feeding, whatever entities down there could still be feeding off the trauma of that.
Yeah, it's bringing down NPCs, rich NPCs as dinner, or as companion souls for the ones that are down there from the original sinking.
It's a really, really creepy thought, that it really.
Well, when I read it in John Michael Greer's book, I was kind of reading. It was one of those books where you kind of read them. Well, that's very interesting. And then he comes to the section about drowned people looking for company, and I have to say, I got goose pimples and my hair stood on end the way he described it in the book. And it's sort of like, and I think the reason why is because it was kind of made a lot of sense in many ways when you think about it.
Oh, and also when you think about drowning, it must be a very traumatic way to go, because for a little while you're still conscious while you're panicking, but then people who have almost drowned have experienced how after that kind of passes, it becomes very spiritual and very calm.
Yeah, and they have those like life review things happen to them often when they're going through that experience. A friend of my aunt's drowned when she was a teenager. It was an awful experience at the beach, and she could swim and everything. I often find it interesting how people who are even good swimmers can can perish in water that isn't even that rough.
And also, being under the water would be a very similar environment to being, say, on another planet, because if you're on another planet and it's different atmosphere, you're going to suffocate because you can't breathe. And also underwater is like being on another planet.
Oh, it's another realm down there. It really is, for as far as we're concerned. And I think, our relationship with the sea, with the waters, is, we're probably one of the few. In one of my books, I think it was Sorcery, or it might have been the Druid Code, I wrote about how a kingfisher, the bird, has this remarkable life where it flies through the air and it also goes underwater and catches like minnows and fry and things like that. And suppose you were a kingfisher and you had a conversation with, say, a condor or an albatross that soars high in the sky, or an eagle, and told them that, underneath those rivers and waters is a whole other world. They couldn't grasp it. It would be it would be like, the kingfisher being a shaman going into other states of consciousness, or on psychedelics and going into another realm of reality. So, I mean, I always thought the kingfisher was a perfect analogy for the contrast, the schism between our atmospheric world and the underwater world.
I wonder if the entities in the underwater world, if they're there, they want to drag us in. I wonder if that's because we're polluting the ocean and the seas, or the way we treat it, and with those great big monstrosities that people cruise in.
I watched the 1953, I think it was, movie Moby Dick recently, made by John Huston with Gregory Peck, and it very much creates that notion that mankind is at war with the creatures of the sea, and the sea is on the side of the creatures, and the humans have to become almost animalistic to win that, or to even survive that battle. And it's a phenomenal movie. If you haven't seen it, I highly recommend it. It's definitely a very, very Fortean version of the novel, and Gregory Peck is absolutely sensational in it, as is Richard Basehart. But it definitely gave that thing. Another aspect of the water and Fortean is the number of paranormal events around water. You mentioned the Sandown Clown, but if you look at so many of the famous UFO flaps, like the one in the Hudson Valley in New York back in the early 80s, late 70s, the Mothman events at Point Pleasant on the Ohio River in West Virginia, and it just goes on and on. The Clyde UFO things in Scotland. There's an enormous body of paranormal and Fortean reports. The Mersey, particularly in England, that's quite remarkable. It's considering how short it is, and the amount of Fortean events connected to that. It's there's something about the water, this concept of it being a portal between two realities, but also allows itself to be kind of a doorway, I think, in some ways, between two realities. Like you mentioned at the introduction with the jellyfish UFO things. What's that named after? A jellyfish, And then that brings us back to the whole concept of, our old friend of the show, H.P. Lovecraft, and the old ones and the deep ones, and the connection between cosmic beings in outer space and beings living deep in the ocean, and mankind's relationship with both of them, that they're interrelated in so many ways. That again, our canon of literature in mythology and stuff is full of this stuff, from mermaids to sirens to all kinds of sea monsters, and the whole Bermuda Triangle. It just never ends. It's Does the water create the paranormal event, opening the portal, or does our consciousness engaging with it? I think Jung in the Red Book has a very interesting painting, and also a passage on the anatomy of the sea monster, and in terms of the psychic effect the sea monster in terms of the underlying psychic self. So, and which is very profound for the time it came out. And and the sea monster is essentially a kind of like the shadow, but it's really closer to an overwhelming of emotions. And the sea represents that very much, the turbulent emotions, the overwhelming emotions. And another thing you said about you're in the bath and you have realizations. I've actually had, and I know people who had psychic experiences and premonitions. I mean, bloody real, spot on, hardcore premonitions while in the shower, which is quite amazing. And so that even when you're in the shower and that water's pouring on top of you, even though you're not submerged, it it's 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 allowing you to uh, charge elements of your psyche that are normally dormant or semi-dormant.
And we are made of 70% water as well, which is interesting. The more we talk about this, the more I'm convinced it's something to do with the static electricity that water kind of generates into the atmosphere. And I'm wondering, perhaps it's the static electricity that actually fuels and allows these entities that come from other realms or from the spirit world to be able to come through the door or the portal into this world.
Well, that's where Thor and Loki come from in the Nordic pagan pantheon. Thor is the god of thunder, and he's chasing Loki, who's the lightning, and the lightning is followed by the thunder across the sky, and that's caused by the enormous electrical charge. We also have the whole things of how Frankenstein, using galvanism and the energies stored up inside a storm to bring dead bodies to life within Mary Shelley's novel. That's also an element of that. So and the thunderstorms are so central to so many of the lore, or these ghost stories or horror stories often begin with a thunderstorm. It's the opening of the portal, that allows the narrative to unfold.
With regards to all these sightings and things that are being seen now recently, it does make you think or wonder, are they coming from the ocean? And people just assume that they're coming from the stars or the sky. Is it these interdimensional beings, or even if you want to call them jinn or demons or whatever, is that the way that they get into this realm? Do they come through the sea as well, perhaps? Because there is a demon, and I do forget his name, one of the Solomonic demons, who actually collects the souls of people who've drowned.
Yeah, the Solomonic deities things are compiled by new, as we know them today. We talk about this in the second half of the show by a huge canon of Arabic and Jewish and Christian lore, but it's within the Arabic mystic tradition. You have a strong association with demons that live under the Red Sea. Now, they're not jinn, they're called the Dev, D-E-V. And there's a phenomenal collection of artwork devoted to them at the Chester Beatty Gallery in Dublin. It's a phenomenal gallery of ancient manuscripts, and they have a whole bunch of Islamic manuscripts there concerning the Dev. And the Dev is not the jinn, it's a demon that lives outside the domain of humans and the jinn. And often they're procured from the Red Sea in order to bring things like megaliths and columns and parts of infrastructure from the bottom of the ocean. There could be an Atlantean type of element there to that, racial memory or something. But yeah, it's a big deal in Islamic mysticism, well, really, proto-Islamic mysticism. So you're talking about ancient Arabic stuff from like the Roman period of demons that lived under the Red Sea and being procured to supply items needed on the land.
It's for all the spiritual entities and all the interdimensional entities that come here. They must all come into this realm via the same route. And my spidey senses are saying it has something to do with the water.
Well, if you look at the theory of evolution, and even if you don't believe in it, the concept of the Darwinian theory, it does make sense that life began in the ocean. It would, if it began in some kind of primordial ancient way, the look how old the octopus is and it's been down there for so long and so on. So it makes sense. And before we're born, we're aquatic creatures. At one point, we've even looked like a fish when we were developing, and we had gills and everything. So that's a throwback to, who we are Innsmouthians, really, when you think about it. We had the gills and we swam in water inside our mothers. And so I think there's an element of that to it as well. When you think about once you leave the shore, the ocean is a very inhospitable place for humans to go and very risky, especially in the old days. But as soon as they could build any kind of boat, the humans were out into the sea. It's almost like, as James Joyce called it, our eternal mother. There's kind of like a maternal need to return to it. And this could also be part of the Fortean and paranormal lore that's within that as well.
Yes, with the sailors and the fishermen, the lot of them, especially from the olden times, they didn't fare very well. They didn't do very well when they came back on land, and they said they couldn't find the sea legs. I think they referred to them as. They lost their sea legs. They needed to get back
Yeah.
onto the ocean or onto the sea. And I wonder, is that because there's a certain type of person that is welcome within those realms?
In Ireland for years, it was a father would often parents used to discourage their daughters from marrying a sailor or a merchant marine man because they would say that, he's married to the sea, he'll never be married to you. And that's a real, as soon as they, the old joke, as soon as they get a whiff of this, of the ocean across the salt marshes, she's on her own again, and he's off on the seven seas.
A bit like the lighthouse keepers, I think you have to be of a certain disposition, a certain psyche to be able to do that kind of work or to live your life out at sea 70% of the time. I think you've got to be of a certain constitution or you'll go insane.
Yeah, definitely. And yet so many of them do it, they've done it over the centuries, no matter how hard it was, loved it.
Yeah, so there's definitely something spiritual about the water, and I do believe there's a portal, there's a way in and out through the water. I don't understand how, but I do think it's something to do with the water, and it has an effect on us. It has an effect on our consciousness. Those of us whose nervous systems are attuned, and even those who aren't, because it can come as a bit of a shock when you sat in the bath and a realization of something comes in, or you get, like you said, your premonition comes in. It can be quite shocking.
Well, Willem Reich's Orgone energy was based on sexual energy, and the primary, practical aim of that, aside from curing disease, was cloud busting. And within magic, cloud busting is one of the earliest things you learn to do. Is you learn to affect the shape of a cloud or make it rain. The Native American or the Hindu rain dances by concentrating on doing a ritual. So there's a connection there with the lightning again. There was I can remember back watching a news report of a terrible drought in England in the 70s. In fact, it was the famous year 76, whoever when punk rock started, that famous summer. And the reporters were like, oh, this bunch of Hindu, yogis met in somewhere in Birmingham and prayed for rain. And to her amazement, it suddenly started lightning and the rain started coming down. It was an amazing scene. And they try to laugh it off like, oh, they just got lucky, or no, those guys made it rain.
Wow. That's I didn't know about that. I have to look up that. Wow. Yeah, definitely the water is a magical element on this planet to our realm. Most definitely.
And we're deeply connected to it.
If we're deeply connected to the water and the water is to us, and we're 70% water, then we're connected to each other as well. And consciousness is an ocean, and we are a drop. Each one of us is a drop in a vast ocean.
Oh yeah.
So that is the discussion of the paranormal and bodies of water, and the possibility of water being portals to other dimensions. So if you've got any thoughts on this topic, or you've had any paranormal experiences around water, or altered states of consciousness, or premonitions, or anything like that when you've been in the bath, the shower, or just around a lake or a river, then please let us know in the comments. We'd be very interested to read them.
Mars has entered Capricorn on January 4th and will remain there until February the 13th. I have noticed a significant flare-up of verbal aggression and a generally irritated mood that started creeping in around the time of January 4th. And several people have already mentioned this to me, and I've seen posts on Facebook, etc. So there seems to be something going on, and I looked a bit closer at the aspects that Mars is making until the end of this transit. And lo and behold, there are two aspects that I think could be blamed for the babblers and Renfields flaring up. I've already made a post about this aspect formation that you can check out in my community tab on my channel, but very briefly, without going into too much detail, the current Mars configuration supports stubbornness, being excessive and blowing things out of proportion, and a generally unstable emotional state. The latter, of course, is the default setting for the so-called Renfields, but given the right triggers, they will go off like clockwork when a configuration such as the current one comes along. Of course, it can also manifest globally in corresponding ways, and the beginning of a transit as well as the end tend to be more intense than the general duration, although a certain vibe will dominate. I therefore advocate caution again around early to mid-February, and the negative influence affects us all more or less, but the good side of any difficult transit, such as motivation for practical success, which is the case here, eludes the perpetually triggered. So you have to try and make the best of it. Try not to get agitated by people. And if you do, then don't shy away from using the block button and try to channel any upcoming frustrations or anger into something creative or productive, because this current time quality can absolutely be very beneficial if you use it. On February 5th, Mercury enters Aquarius and remains there until the 23rd. Mercury represents our mind, intellect, and how we process information and express ourselves verbally. In Aquarius, which is a fixed air sign traditionally ruled by Saturn, our minds take on a more Saturnian quality, which is characterized by realism, pragmatic, and solution-oriented communication instead of too much emotional attachment. Renfields may not benefit from this though. And we will also likely be more interested in broader societal or social issues and not just one-on-one relationships. With the Sun also in Aquarius until the 19th, the majority of the month will be influenced by an attitude that isn't overly emotional, which of course isn't a bad thing at all. Detachment doesn't mean that you have zero emotions. It just means that you have a heightened ability to put them into perspective with logic, which is something that we all can use. And Aquarius is very logical indeed. So this can be a good time for planning, communicating, business, organizing, and taking on a role that can very much be a leader who is also a good team player, because this sign is the embodiment of a socially minded individualist that can be idealistic in a broader societal sense, and even too much so when unbalanced. The ultimate extreme, which is unbalanced, would be a sci-fi utopian and a cultish attitude. The Sun, Mercury, and Pluto in Aquarius are making a square to Jupiter and Uranus in Taurus. This can be highly motivational on a personal level when we feel an urge to get off our behinds and take care of business and get creative. With Uranus, there's always the element of surprise, but the Sun and Mercury in Aquarius can help us navigate unexpected developments or revelations maybe with mental flexibility and Aquarius' famous out-of-the-box thinking. Globally, there might be some technology-related stuff or events such as cyber attacks, especially when Mars moves into Aquarius on the 13th, or maybe something related to digital currency, as Venus, the planet of money, not just love, but also money, joins the Aquarius planets on the 16th. So we'll see. I wouldn't be surprised if something took place along the lines of a cyber attack on banks or something AI related. But I can't see into the future. I can only try my best to read the signs, and I hope I'm wrong when these signs suggest that something is going to hit the fan. Aquarius' traditional ruler is Saturn in Pisces, where it denotes illusion and deception. So this is definitely a time where we have to be very careful. And as the song says, believe half of what you hear and none of what you see. Or was it the other way around? Anyway, whatever you might hear through the grapevine, don't trust it. Aquarius' modern ruler, Uranus, is in Taurus, which stands for physical and material stability. And Uranus is, of course, a disruptive and first and foremost unstable and very surprising element. So in any case, I would advise to keep your eyes open and to not get swept away by collective notions of excitement, either positively or negatively, and maybe some new crisis will be played out will be played up to be extremely threatening when in reality it isn't. And health and tech related developments could also be in the cards. Whatever it may be, try to harness your logical thinking capabilities and stay out of pointless and distractive entanglements. On February 9th, we have a new moon in Aquarius, which I will make an extra post about. On February 16th, Venus enters Aquarius. Here, the symbol for the goddess of love makes a square to the notoriously disruptive Uranus, which could make relationships feel a bit less stable or predictable. On February 19th, the Sun enters Pisces. Pisces is a mutable water sign and traditionally ruled by Jupiter. The modern ruler is Neptune, currently in Pisces, representing, as mentioned before, themes of illusion, deception, but also psychic openness, dreamy and artistic inclinations, and a heightened suggestibility and moodiness. The good side of Neptune is a highly evolved intuition and spirituality, but just as Fiona Edgar so perfectly stated, the modern planets are Kali Yuga planets and will be expressed globally in their more negative side. But on a personal level, it is very much possible to harness a modern planet's positive nature too. Pisces is a highly sensitive and psychic sign, and as the 12th sign of the zodiac, it represents the 12th house in a birth chart, which is the realm of dreams, our subconscious nature and drives and fears, isolation, and also a place where we can tend to self-sabotage. But very importantly, it is where we can establish a connection to the divine as well as our ancestors. When the Sun moves into Pisces, our perception and motivation will therefore become colored by Pisces nature, and some of our priorities might shift from the more practical to the more intuitive, artistic, or spiritual. We have to be careful with this placement though, because as lovely and dreamy and empathic it is with its beautiful water sign qualities, Pisces is a mutable sign, and therefore our emotions can fluctuate more easily, as well as our physical health. The Sun represents our physical body and life essence, and in this boundary diffusing sign, our life force will be more delicate and unstable. Therefore, we must be extra cautious with how we distribute energy and also with what we consume. I would abstain from alcohol if possible, because we do have Neptune as well in Pisces, and this is always a very immune weakening placement. And therefore, you should be careful to not give your body too much to digest or detox. Until the Sun enters Aries in late March, we could feel more easily tired and drained. So therefore, make sure to not overwork yourself and leave space for rest and regeneration. Pisces has a good energy and can be quite cheerful and motivated, but as it fluctuates so easily, times of feeling depressed or vulnerable, tired, overly emotional, etc. can definitely derail us. Another important characteristic of Pisces is the tendency to lose sight of boundaries and to go beyond one's limits. This is represented by the traditional ruler Jupiter, which stands for expansion or even excess. for better or worse. In order to get the best out of Pisces season, remember that it's perfectly okay to take some time out to rest, and even if you are conscious of your diet, of course you can enjoy good stuff. You just have to make sure not to give your body too much work, that is all. In medical astrology, Pisces governs the feet, the blood and lymphatic system, and the Virgo-Pisces axis is in charge of the immune system, the lymphatics, and the sympathetic, which is the involuntary nervous system. When the Saturn-Sun conjunction is exact around the end of the month, people who have problems with the hips might be more affected. On February 23rd, Mercury enters Pisces. Now conjunct the Sun, Saturn, and Neptune, our minds, represented by Mercury, will turn to the Piscean realm that I've mentioned before, the realm of dreams, artistic inclinations, etc. But Mercury is in detriment in this sign, meaning that the planet cannot express its energy freely, and it's literally being drowned out by Pisces' emotional nature. Conjunct Saturn and Neptune, we might be more prone to miscommunication or misinterpreting information, so we have to be very careful not to take things at face value and take our time to process things before we react to them. On the positive side, our imagination and creativity can border on the psychic now and bring us really intense, vivid dreams or creative inspiration. If you're an artist or have a creative hobby, this could be really awesome for you. For the periodically ranting and raving, however, a new wave of cognitive dissonance or even depression could come along. Whether or not this will be expressed openly remains to be seen. Globally or environmentally, themes surrounding water might come up, possibly also expressions of religious fanaticism. On the 24th, we have a full moon in Virgo, which of course I'm going to address in a separate post. I make frequent updates when the moon changes signs every other day that you can find on Facebook, as well as new moon and full moon posts. All the links are listed on my website, and I wish you all the best. Until next time.
For this week's folk horror cinema, we are reviewing the 1976 horror film The Omen, starring Gregory Peck, Lee Remick and David Warner. And I think most people have seen this movie, so I'll just give a quick overview of the plot. It's about a US ambassador called Robert Thorne, played by Gregory Peck, and his wife Catherine, played by Lee Remick, and they lose their unborn child after the birth. And in an attempt to shield his wife from the grief, Robert agrees to adopt an orphaned baby boy and not tell his wife that their baby had actually died. And they call the orphaned baby Damien, and life goes on, and the wife's in ignorant bliss, and Robert Thorne thinks that he's done the right thing. And as Damien grows older, strange events occur, and there's a series of gruesome deaths around the Thorne family, and the arrival of a priest who insists that Robert accepts Christ. And eventually this leads to Robert's questioning the origins of his adopted son, and the mother starts to feel that something's not right and that Damien's not really her son. And at first she thinks she's going mad until the 5-year-old Damien tries to kill her. And then there's a newspaper photographer called Keith Jennings, played by David Warner, and he helps Robert to uncover the truth behind Damien's birth. And they become connected because Keith is a photographer for a paper, and he often photographed high-profile people that were around the Thorne family, and he notices some strange marks on various photographs when developing them, and then those that have had these marks on the photos have been killed in freak circumstances. So he goes with Robert to Rome to look into Damien's mysterious origins, and they find that there's been a fire that's engulfed the hospital, destroying his wife Kathy's maternity records and killing all the hospital staff except for a Father Spiletto. And they find him in a monastery with severe burns and muteness, and he manages to convey the name of the cemetery where Damien's biological mother is resting. So Robert and Keith go to the mother's grave, and there's a jackal carcass inside it, and in the next grave they find the remains of a child. And that's when the truth then dawns on Robert, when he realises that his child, his own son, has been intentionally murdered to make way for them to adopt Damien. And their investigation reveals that Damien is the Antichrist who was destined to bring about the apocalypse by rising up through the world of politics. And in amongst all that, there are some chilling characters. The acolytes of the devil, in particular the two nannies, were very disturbing, especially Mrs. Baylock with her dogmatic devotion to the cause and just evil eyes and smile. And the film worked as a supernatural horror because it was made like a slow burn psychological thriller. You knew what was coming, and it took just the right amount of time to build up to the inevitable. There wasn't a lot of blood really in the film, although many of the characters did come to a gruesome end, but it was portrayed in a way that was very effective without being overly graphic. And it was a film where the story and the suspense chills you more than the actual visuals do. Now, I first watched this film when I was around 12 or 13 during the Friday night horror double bill on the BBC, showing the entire trilogy over 2 weeks. The first and the second parts were shown on one Friday night, and the third was put on TV the following week. And it genuinely scared me back then. The story and the thought of it was in my head for a long time after the credits had gone up. And back then, I even entertained the idea that the biblical story it portrayed might be true. Anyway, long story short, as you grow older and wiser, you realise that the film's impact wasn't some profound revelation, but it was more the fact that I wasn't psychologically ready or mature enough to handle a film like that at that age. Anyway, watching it again recently, I actually really enjoyed it, and I appreciated it for what it is. It's a film that's rich in allegory and metaphor that reflects the state of the Western world. And while I don't adhere to the Christian faith, and I don't believe the narrative presented in the movie as being a factual account, I do recognise the presence of an archetype or a spiritual force that the film personified through its characters. And I saw the film as more symbolic rather than a literal depiction of religious beliefs. And the characters and events in the film, for me, conveyed deeper meanings about the human condition, societal issues and world dilemmas. And yes, I do believe a spiritual force is running loose on this planet, and we are in the middle of a spiritual battle, but I don't see it being how the Bible says it is in its book of Revelation. And in the film, all the devil's disciples had the 3 sixes as a birthmark, as a sign of their allegiance to him. And I saw that as allegory today as being the tickets to the Britney Spears concerts. And there was just so much in this movie that could be interpreted as how politicians and corporations that do not have our best interests at heart can get people to worship them and spread their word as gospel. And I think watching the film as a child served as a kind of ontological training for what lay ahead, even though at that time I couldn't articulate that. And the concept of hauntology hadn't even been coined. Watching it again now and looking back, it was like a nod to a deeper understanding that hauntology seems to define. I don't know, it's strange. It's a strange realisation, and even now it's difficult to put into words. But as an adult, I enjoyed this movie very much, and I'm also glad it scared me as a child, because that helped me understand the way of the world and the world of allegory as a grown-up and as a pagan. and I would give this movie 8 out of 10.
It's yet more proof that the 1970s was the golden age of Hollywood. They just made one excellent film after the other. The Omen is superbly cast. Lee Remick, Gregory Peck and David Warner, and all the other characters that fit into the story. It's all very well done. It has left a legacy of stupidity in some ways, in that to this day people think 666 is to do with the devil. It's nothing of the sort. The Book of Revelations is quite clear that it's the Roman Emperor Nero, and 666, the beast, represents him and his banking power and the control over the Jews in the whole of the empire. So people, to this day still think, oh, 666, the number of the devil, and you see it's all over the truth or spirit. It's so obnoxious, and it's so completely incorrect. The Book of Revelations was meant to happen in the time it was written, not in the future. It was supposed to happen during the reign of the Emperor Nero. Now, the other good side of it is it gave us like one of the better Iron Maiden songs. The Number of the Beast came from that, and I used that intro, he who has the reckoning, the beast. And at the beginning was very good, I thought. Enjoyed that. And yeah, I love the film. I think it's brilliantly made. I'm glad you picked up there on Billy Whitelaw as the second babysitter nanny. Billy Whitelaw is terrifying anyway. There's something about, I can't explain what it is about Billy Whitelaw, but she's terrifying, the way she looks or something. And my God, she was absolutely petrifying in that role in the film. And she was in The Mother of the Krays in the Kray movie. It paced along beautifully. Like I said, a detective story. David Warner's sort of interjection as the kind of the Columbo of the supernatural was fantastic. The whole way they developed the story with the line on the photograph showing how they would die, starting off when they killed the first Doctor Who as the priest Father Brennan, and then he's personally involved because he's taken a photograph inside Brennan's apartment, and he photographs himself in the mirror and sees that he's in danger as well, which transpires when they go to the Middle East with that unbelievable scene involving the truck and the sheet of glass. The whole thing was, I'd give it a 9 out of 10. I don't care that the story is biblical and it's wildly infactual. It's given people a completely misleading representation of the Book of Revelations and the letter of St. John to the letters of St. John. And Gregory Peck is always great. Gregory Peck could be reading the phone book and he'd win an Oscar. He's that kind of actor. The child that played him was terrifying as well in his own little way. And there is a folklore, kind of hauntological folklore around the movie, that when Gregory Peck was flying over to England to make it, the plane nearly went down in a thunderstorm over the Atlantic. And the little kid that played Damien, it was like this little hard-nosed Cockney. He wasn't a little posh kid at all. And he was like 7 or something. He'd be begging the crew for cigarettes and stuff like that. He was like a little monster himself in real life. But he was amazing. And the scenes that stood out for me, I thought, were very well done. Where the scene in the wildlife park where the baboons go crazy, that was very well done. If you look at the way they filmed that, first, you really did believe that the baboons were seeing the Antichrist, because they come over, they'd run away first. They run away and kind of, like terror like this, and they're like looking at each other, and then they attack. And that was very realistic, as was when he goes over to the giraffes, and the giraffes just look at him and run away. That's how animals would behave to something like that. They wouldn't be as dramatic as the baboons, who are primates, are probably closest to us. The film is very sad, actually. The whole thing of you feel so bad for Lee Remick. The woman's like whole world is destroyed from one end to the other, and they are the establishment. He's the ambassador to Great Britain on behalf of the United States, and on the surface their life should be perfect, but it's one horror after the next. And it does make you wonder about these conspiracy theories about child sacrifice among the elites. There's always been a very interesting thing that they killed the first child and stuff like that, and that's how you get your place at the the table with the big shots. And I've often wondered about that. That was actually comes from like a kind of I think it's an ancient Greek thing or something. So you do wonder about that. The film, I'd give it 9 out of 10. The only reason I didn't give it 10 out of 10 is because it's historically inaccurate, in terms of the way the biblical quotes are used. But that's it. I mean, I enjoyed it so much, and that music, dum dum diddy dum, and it's terrifying. I watched, like yourself, I watched it when I was a teenager, when the Betamax and the VHS first came back out in the early 80s, and I was just like, oh, that's just great. And of course, then I was wondering, it had me wondering about the Book of Revelations and this kind of thing, because as the series progresses through the Omen 2, which is superb. The Omen 2, I think, is actually on some levels a better movie. And then the Omen 3, which Sam Neill it's a bit naff, actually, to be honest with you. But it did make me wonder if, like, the Age of the Beast and stuff. And later on, when I found out that, Barbara Bush was still, Barbara Bush's mother was probably impregnated by, almost certainly, it's very plausible, by Aleister Crowley, and he wanted to create he wanted to destroy Christianity. He wanted to bring in Crowley, and then you have like George Bush Jr. in the White House, and he's starting the wars in the Gulf and tying in with all that part of the world and everything. It is a fascinating thing, the hauntology around it in itself. But I absolutely love the film. It's a great movie, and it definitely deserves its place in the Hall of Fame of horror films. And if you haven't seen it, you really got to see it. And I highly suggest seeing the second one too as well. The third one is optional. It's a bit silly, but the second one is a superb follow-on with some tremendous acting by the young cast in it, the whole cast. So The Omen, yep, thumbs up, almost perfect, but not perfect.
One thing that got me, and that was when, because all through the film you knew what he was, and you wanted it to stop. You wanted him to be stopped and destroyed. You were watching it, waiting for that to happen. You knew it didn't. But then at the end, when Damien was crying, when he got him with the swords and he took him to the church to do the business, and Damien was crying. He was actually crying and saying, "Please, Daddy, no. Please, Daddy, no." And he was asking his dad not to kill him. That was a real choker. And I'm thinking, I couldn't have done it. I couldn't have done it. I wouldn't have been able to do it either. And I liked how that made you question your own moral compass, because all through the film you knew he was evil and he needed to be destroyed. But then when he was begging for his life, you kind of did a 180-degree turn, and your feelings changed just for a second, and you actually felt sorry for him. And when they torment you like that in films, it's as bad as a jump scare, because it's like a roller coaster that you just suddenly change direction. And yeah, I like the way they mess with your emotions like that.
And the little shit smiles at the camera at the funeral of his parents at the end, I love the use of the dogs as well. The dogs as familiars. They brought that in from witchcraft, the concept of the dog, the devil dog, the Bagas, the hound of hell, Cerebrus, all that kind of thing. I thought that was a very good interjection into the script.
I wonder if that's where the nickname for those Rottweilers came from, because they were known as the devil dogs in the 80s, weren't they?
I don't know. I thought that was the pit bulls.
The Rottweilers had it kind of goes from breed to breed, but the Rottweilers had a few years of bad press as well
because of that movie, and they're actually quite sweet dogs. Yeah,
I'm glad I watched it again as an adult, because I kind of stayed away from it because of how it frightened me a bit as a kid. But to watch it again, yeah, it was great.
Yeah, as a piece of art, it's definitely enjoyable. And if you like old horror films that have a good story with top actors in it and well made, you have to remember that, like, Gregory Peck was a Hollywood legend when they made that, and David Warner was on the way up as a big movie star as well. And it definitely, they didn't cut corners on the casting, and it's got some fabulous scenes in it as well, almost Hitchcockian scenes. The one where Lee Remick is hanging onto the banisters while the little shit is like not helping her. And that's the precursor of that is the goldfish bowl falling in slow motion to the floor. a nice kind of art house touch to the film. There was a few scenes that were like that, where you'd have incidental shots of a raven or something like that. I thought the way when they went to the Etruscan cemetery near Rome, north of Rome, to find the grave of the Italian girl that died and his dead son, well, the jackal, I mean, sorry. That I love the way the graveyard looked. It reminded me of the old MGM Hollywood horror films. You know, it had that Lon Chaney vibe going on.
Very, very atmospheric. And like it's a thriller as well. It's like a Hitchcock thriller, definitely. And that gave it another level as well.
If you watch the third one, it's exactly what you were saying about making us think about today. We won't review it on here because I don't think it's good enough for us to review, really. But the Thorn Industries, which he takes over from his father, he's turning in. He's a Bill Gates character, and he wants to make money from famine. So they're starving people deliberately in the third world in order to sell them thorn food, which is a Soylent Green type thing, and our food crops grown with, like, you know, really bad chemicals and stuff like that. So it's like it's that what we call, you know, a philanthropath today, and he has all the youth all worshipping and thinking he's like this like great like leader who's going to heal the problems of the world by feeding them, but he's really starving them so he can make himself look good. So, but if the third one really gets into that, but it has the most obnoxious Christian ending with Jesus appear. Jesus appears in everything, and it's all like hallelujah and all this stuff. And it was a waste of a good actor like Sam Neill, to be honest with you.
I do understand, though, why people watching it back then might have thought that might have been factually true, especially with how the world is. I do understand that people might have took that as gospel. As I can understand why you might have took that literal.
Yeah, but we also live in a world of half-assed facts and ignorant population who basically can't see the context of anything, only the hype behind it. Like, I can remember in late 1983, me and my friend Jerry were getting shit-faced and getting drunk, and he says, so Thomas, are we doomed next year? And I says, what do you mean? He says, next year is 1984. Isn't that predicted as the end of the world in a book? And I says, that's not what 1984 is about at all. But it was just that he had not read it, he had not looked it up, he didn't know anything about it. But you know, the 666 thing is the hype substituting the context. So that's very common with all, you know, with normies in general, you know, what I call them, that they, you know, to this day, someone like my mother would, and I'm not putting her down, I'm just saying she would think the 666 thing was about the devil and all that, and would believe that film was literal, you know, that kind of a thing. That's probably, you know, many women and adults her age would too as well. And ones our age and younger also, you know, my age and younger. So, but still to this day, like, I'd be looking through the, you know, the sort of like truth forums and the alt scene forums on Facebook, and the 666 thing, God, they've gotten some mileage out of that one.
And none of them ever mention the other, do they? They never mention the 333.
Yeah, and when I asked them what does 666 mean, and they stop, and you can see them, they're pausing online wondering, and they go, because they know if they say the Antichrist, I'm going to say, no, it's not. But, you know, this kind of thing, like, and you see them, like, showing the lotto numbers, you know, 666. I remember, like, my good friend, God love him, Enoch Crane, he fell for that once, and I was saying to him, that's not what 666 means, Ian. It's not. You're following on from, like, a popular misconception. And he listened, and he said, oh, fair enough, now I get it. But you're right, they never listen to the half number of that, do they? They've no desire to think about that. In fact, 666 is probably a lucky thing because it often relates to the accumulation of wealth. You know, when I lived in New York, there was the 666 building on Fifth Avenue, proudly proclaimed in letters, big letters, and it's still there probably to this day, 666 Fifth Avenue. And I had a friend, Jeff, who was terrified to go and work in it he was a freelance graphic designer. He was afraid, I'm not working, I'm not, like an Italian fella, I'm not working on that, I'm not working on that motherfucking building, you know, that kind of thing. And the devil is in there, you know. And I was, you know, explaining to him in Kabbalism, 666 is quite a lucky number. It's about the accumulation of wealth, you know, and this is really what it relates to in terms of Nero. Nero's accumulation of wealth is 666, and he is the beast.
You do see those numbers a lot in movies that flash up now and again in movies, and I can understand people wondering why. What is it? Are they giving secret messages? But it's the accumulation of wealth, and it's a lucky number in the Kabbalistic concept. Then, what? Yes, they're going to put it in. It's like a lucky number. You would put a lucky number in a movie where you can.
Yeah, 47s, 42s, 33s, 19s. Yeah, definitely. And the 666 thing, I used to work for a guy, he had a real estate company, his name was Kaufman, and all his buildings had 4 and 7 in them. So it was 747 3rd Avenue, 47 State Street, 17 State Street, 747 3rd Avenue, 767 5th Lexington Avenue, and I went, you know, I went into his office one time. And he was, you know, this guy was a billionaire, and his office was on the top of the building, and he was asking me about things like I was doing electronic work for them at the time, and video security and building cameras and stuff, and his office was full of all Kabbalistic stuff. So you know, they brought that stuff from Russia with them, and it worked for him. It worked, you know.
The problem with the numerology is when it comes to the 666, nobody looks at the numerology of it. They don't get past the satanic connotations of it. And everybody, it frightens everybody, and everybody turns away. And if you want to talk about the number 666, or you see it as a lucky number or a number of wealth, then you must be satanic too. That's the kind of mindset that goes around the.
Yeah, this one, they show this one. There's a, you know, and they say, oh, that's seeing 666. It's not. It's a patriopathic magic to protect you from someone stealing your wealth. See, guys, you learn something every day on Hocus Focus.
You put it into the right concept or the right content, then it suddenly all makes sense, and it just highlights how ridiculous.
You also have to remember that the Kabbalists and the people who understand the power of these numbers create deliberate stigmas so the profane run away from them. So what's the best way to keep 33 and 666 for yourself? And 13 especially, what's the best way to do that? To make those numbers stigmas so the profane live in terror of them, and you have them all to yourself. Top sorcery tip there, kiddos. Think about it.
It's number 13, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. 13 is a great number. It's been very good in my life.
So you learn something on this show. So that was The Omen, 1976 version. Let us know what you guys think of it, if you've seen it, or if you're going to go and watch it again. Have you seen the remake, the 2006 remake? What did you think of The Omen 2 and number 3, The Final Conflict? And leave your thoughts and feelings in the comments.
And what does it say about Billy Whitelaw? She's actually more terrifying than the devil, and she's just a nanny.
She was perfect for that part. The agent must have been on the phone quicker than you could say.
I mean, I'm sure she's a lovely lady in real life, but Billy Whitelaw contains this energy in some roles that she plays that you were like, oh, you just don't mess with her, you know, that kind of thing. And she had that in spades in this movie. If you want to see her terrifying in a film, and the craze while she's talking about being a backstreet abortionist, you know, Jesus. No, she's a phenomenal actress, but my God, she knows how to scare you.
She's got a demonic smile. It's the smile. She's got a lot of teeth and very, very cold eyes.
The eyes could cut through steel.
Yeah.
You could see someone like a big, gigantic Hollywood star like Gregory Peck being actually like afraid of her on the set. You know?
Yeah. Between takes and things, I don't know if there'd be much banter going on with her, but yeah, she was a scary looking woman. She's still alive?
I don't know. Didn't she start out on Coronation Street? I think that's where she started out. She started on.
I don't know.
I think she's also on the cover of one of the Smiths records as well. You know, where Smiths used to put 60 stars on the cover of their albums and singles. I think she's on one of them as well. There's a good one for you guys to look at in the comments. Research Billy Whitelaw, and am I right that she's on one of the Smiths album or single covers? Well, as you can tell, we have a multicam setup for the new Flash version of Hocus Focus, but we have only one psychic hygienist, and that's Sara. And is she here to do the Billy Whitelaw on us and scare us, or is she here to help us deal with the evil and the darkness? It's the psychic hygiene with Sara.
Well, I was cleaning my windows this week because they were bloody filthy, and this January sun doesn't half highlight how dirty they are on the inside. So I thought I'm going to have to do them. And as I was doing them, I was thinking about what to do for this week's psychic hygiene suggestion. And I started to think about how the hustle and bustle of life can make it too easy to accumulate negativity that settles into our minds and bodies. And it can manifest as destructive patterns in attitudes, behaviours, habits, and feelings over time. Kind of like the dirt settling on a window, dimming the light that shines in. And that's what's inspired this week's psychic hygiene. So it's time to boost your psychic hygiene and let your inner light shine again like a freshly polished window with a new chamois leather. Consider your daily interactions. Are your conversations uplifting, or do they lean towards toxicity? Think about your habits and thoughts. Are they nurturing your well-being or contributing to a negative energy build-up? Look at your associations. Are they in harmony with your spirit? If not, give them an overhaul and respectfully let go of those that are no longer serving you. We know harmful substances and behaviours can drain our physical energy, but psychic toxins can also leave you feeling stressed, tired, and demoralised too. And these things suck the joy out of life and cloud the brightness, just like a dirty window. And it's comparable to staying in a room filled with toxic waste. Why subject yourself to the psychic equivalent of that in your life? You want to put it another way, it's like going into the toilet after somebody's just been in there and done a number two. You wouldn't sit there, would you, and hang around in that environment? So sit down and relax into that deep, relaxing alpha state and take a moment to listen to your inner self, or your spirit, if you like, and ask if certain aspects of your life are contributing to a negative vibe. And the answer will come to you with a niggling feeling that something is off. And your spirit deserves a positive environment for it to thrive, because it can't be fully expressed or felt among all that constant negativity. So consider a psychic detox and don't procrastinate in getting rid of mental and emotional toxins. It requires self-control and honesty. And meditation, journaling, and creating can also help you through the process. And when I'm creating, my mind is so focused on what I'm doing that reality and time just seem to cease to exist for a while. And it's when I come back to the waking consciousness that I instantly recognize various things that no longer serve me. So don't allow yourself to become exhausted, disheartened, or to lose vitality to things that no longer benefit you. So feed your soul with the best environment that you can create for it and ditch the smog. And that's my psychic hygiene suggestion for this week.
Your analogy reminds me of that old Motown song, I Can't Stand the Rain on My Window, bringing back those memories. It's that's what that reminds me of. Thank you, Sarah.
You're welcome.
And our second topic tonight is one that people have actually asked for. And so I'm stepping into the fray in order to try and give an outline of what is an absolutely colossal subject. And people were asking me or us to explain and talk about the Lesser Key of Solomon. Now, probably the most famous, well, easily the most famous grimoire of magic and the invocation of demons and other things, and a greatly misunderstood book because it contains a lot more than just that. Now, its connection to King Solomon of the Bible, it's a very complex history. Now, to even try to attempt to explain or go over the history of Solomonic magic in terms of what brought us through the Lesser Key of Solomon, the book, the text. It begins with, of course, the story of King Solomon, and it deals with his being given a seal by the archangel Michael, which contains a pentagram, which allows him to bind and harvest and use demons for his own purpose. And depending on the telling of the story, there are Greek sources, Arabic sources, Christian sources, and there are Hebrew sources, of course. It's either Beelzebub, but more commonly it's Asmodeus. Now, there's a kind of like a weird interplay between all those three entities surrounding the story, but ultimately it was about the building of the first temple, which was used by the harvesting of or binding of a demon in order to get a means to cut stone, because it was forbidden to use hewn stone or cut stone or dress stone in the building of the temple. And so at one time there was this interplay between the kind of a soap opera between King Solomon and Asmodeus. Asmodeus in some texts, and some of the Greek texts, is shown at one point as being the king of Jerusalem, the demon that is. So anyway, this lore developed, and you had infusions of Greek, Arabic, Christianized sources. By the 3rd century, it had went on, and by the 12th century in southern France, in the Kabbalistic regions, the story had kind of fermented and gone from like a book of sort of lore, biblical lore, into what was emerging into being a book of magic. Now, this is not unusual, where where you can have a story that contains various elements that eventually becomes a book of magic, in terms of elements within it are very useful for conjurations, summonings, and so on. The Lesser Key of Solomon, as we know it in its completed form, came about in the mid 1600s by an anonymous author. Now, it's interesting that it came about at the time it did, because this was a time of witch burnings and persecutions. It wasn't long after the Pendle witch trials. It wasn't long after all the persecutions of witches in Scandinavia, Scotland, Sweden, Germany, Denmark, and so on, England and France. And so it was probably the worst time of all to produce this, but it was a very little and obscure known book. Most people were not literate back then, not the laity anyway. And the people who collected esoteric books were very a small circle who were basically the establishment. It originally came from a book called the Lemegaton. The Lesser Key of Solomon is divided into 5 books. And the distinction between these 5 books is very important. People just think, don't know about the book, just think it exists for the conjuration of the 72 demons. It has a lot more than that, and it actually is a very useful book for magical practice in general. It's a book of philosophy and personal empowerment, as much as it's a book on the actual use of demons and creating their seals in order to attract their presence and their usefulness. So anyway, the book is divided into five sections, as I said. The first is the Aris Goetia or Goita. It might be Goita. People say Goetia, but it might be Goita because it originally comes from Greek. The word Goetia or Goita in Greek basically means sorcerer or seer or magician, magus, that kind of thing. That's the first one that concerns itself with the 72 demons and their seals or sigils and how to actually what they do. It's like a taxonomy of demonology in terms of these ancient demons. And you have all the players in there, Paimon, Beelzebub, and the whole lot. And they are divided into hierarchical sort of like status. So you have kings, dukes, princes, counts, marquises, and even presidents that are demons. So you'd have the duke of this, the count of that, the marquis of this, and so on. They are not all necessarily, deadly or dangerous or anything like that. They have the specific use, like Asmodeus is very connected to sexuality. Paimon is despite what that movie Hereditary claims, he's actually quite a beneficial, uh, you know, prince or being of the desert, possibly based on early pagan things. He would guide caravans to safety across the desert. So you would invoke him if you were going on a journey across the desert in a caravan and this kind of thing. You would invoke Paimon. And so that's the first book, the Ars Goetia, that completely encapsulates the work of the 72 demons. And that's what most people think the Goetia is. It's one of 5 books. Now, as I said, these all come from incredible sources. If it's almost incomprehensibly complex how the Lesser Key of Solomon arrived to the point where an anonymous author put it together in the mid 1600s. It comes from Arabic, Greek, Western esotericism, and it's all amalgamated into from a religious and theological story surrounding King Solomon, initially about the creation of the first temple in Jerusalem, but has developed into a magical working book, an actual grimoire. And all the centuries in between, it fermented into this. Now, that might seem strange, but it's not unusual at all. It happens even in contemporary literature with things like the Lovecraftian mythos. And, then how the Necronomicon has gone from being a fictional book within the Lovecraft mythos into an actual grimoire, such as Simon's Necronomicon. And I think there's something like 20 to 30 different grimoires based on Lovecraftian lore. It's almost like a proto form of chaos magic, developed in the case of the Lesser Key of Solomon, over an incredibly ancient and long lineage and passage of time, with all different traditions, but heavily Greek and Christianized. There's even Gnostic elements within it as well. So everybody has a say almost in its history, which I think gives it the greatest power. The second book is the Ars Theurgia Goetia, and that's about ritual liturgy. That's about the practice of ritual in magic, the necessity of ritual, the power of ritual, the actual concept of ritual in terms of invocations, summonings, and so on. And it's a very elegantly written section. The third part is the Ars Paulinium, which is about how to call upon the power of the heavens. It's basically a pseudo-astrological text, and it deals with the creation of the magical calendar. So it's about specific dates and magical dates relating to ancient and old astrology. To me, it's the least interesting part of it. I don't know why. I think the Sancyprian grimoire actually does that kind of thing better. Then the fourth book is the Ars Almeidal, which is about the creation of a clay or a wax tablet, in order to contact and communion with angels. Not summon them, but contact and it's just basically about how to create this wax tablet in order to communicate with angels. And finally, the Ars Notordrid. I can't pronounce that. That's the best part of the book. That deals with, it's a self-help book, the bettering of the self. Things such as it's almost like a book of philosophy in the sort of guise as, Michel Montaigne, the French philosopher. It's a book of philosophical self-help, uh, working on your temper, working on your psychological state. This is what makes the books, the Lesser Key of Solomon, so powerful and so, and given it this longevity, in that it's an extremely useful book in lots of ways, and it's one that its reputation is definitely deserved, because it covers the full gauntlet of how to work in the occultic arts in the esoteric world. Now, in the English-speaking world, we're mostly familiar with the 1904 version that was written, translated by MacGregor's Mathers of The Golden Dawn and published via Crowley. So that's how that all came into being. Now, it's not to be confused with Enochian magic. That's a whole other school and a whole other thing. But the Lesser Key of Solomon, there's two ways of approaching it. One, you can read the book for magical practice or developing basically it's almost like a magical schooling to create a sense of magic within yourself. Or you can use it as a way of looking at it. That's a whole world by itself, going into the historical point that brought it to its creation, which is basically the history of Western esotericism. I think that's what, in many ways, it's probably a kind of an esoteric Bible slash history slash grimoire slash self-help book. And this is why people, even up to today, find it very helpful. Now, there's a great fear of it. I mean, as people terrified of it, they don't even want to buy secondhand copies of it. They're so afraid of it. But unless you're doing the actual rituals and anything like that, you don't have to worry about anything. But I would definitely encourage people who may be dubious about it to have a read of it, because you might find it surprisingly useful in your own life, as well as very interesting. The seals and sigils, they've always fascinated me from the time I was a kid. They look like electronic diagrams. They have this ability, almost like you're using a kind of a magical well, you are using a magical technology like a printed circuit board to actually capture this entity for whatever you need. Now you're creating basically you're invoking a power source. And so there's a great sense of reverence and maturity from it. Books like Simon's Necronomicon is often accused of being, appealing to like edgelord teenagers and like that kind of thing, because it's a bit kind of heavy metalish, and it came out in the 70s and stuff like that. The Lesser Key of Solomon is quite different. It's a book of sort of magical responsibility and education. So that's basically all it is. It's 5 books, one dealing with the 72 demons, the other one dealing with the ritual, the third one dealing with the power of the heavens in a kind of an astrological sense, and the magical calendar, and the fourth one dealing with the creation of a wax tablet in order to communicate with angels, and the final one is the personal development chapter, and that's the Lesser Key of Solomon. So have you ever looked into this yourself, Sarah?
Not to this extent, no. And it's a huge subject with lots of nuances. And I'll tell you what I do know about it, and then where the researching of it for this show led me. I know it's a grimoire that was divided into 5 books and focuses on different aspects of magic and spiritual entities. And it's used for ceremonial magic and invocation and exploring the esoteric knowledge. And like you said, the Ars Goetia is the section that's the most well-known and outlines summoning the 72 demons. And I know that according to the text, the 72 demons were summoned by King Solomon and bound to his will so that he could use their powers for various purposes, and that each spirit has a specific sigil and a symbol or a seal representing the demon's name and power. And I believe that the various sigils need to be made in different elements like copper, iron, silver, that kind of thing. They have different ranks according to the power that they have and the estate that they own. Like you said, as presidents, knights, earls, marquises, princes, dukes, and kings. And the rituals in the grimoire should only be used by experienced magic practitioners, and even the text itself does warn that the demons shouldn't be summoned for idle curiosity or entertainment, because they can be unpredictable and harmful if they're not treated correctly. And I also understand that many practitioners of today actually view the demons of the Goetia as more symbolic than literal entities, and they use the sigils to tap into the archetypes of the inner power and creativity rather than trying to control external forces or summon up actual entities. But here's where it led me. And now, forgive me if I've gone off the topic here. I don't know, because it's so complicated, but here's where it led me. Because I've also read and I also know about how these things were said to be pagan deities which were worshipped the way the Christians today worship their god, and that they're ancient Indo-European gods which were worshipped by every pre-Christian civilization in the ancient world. But then as the Abrahamic religions became more dominant, the old deities were demonized to stop the pagans from worshipping them. And then as the pagan faiths were eventually stamped out by Christianity, the pagan gods became the demons of the Christian mythology. So that begs the question, are the angels and the God of the Abrahamic faiths really demons? The I can never pronounce this. The Tetragrammaton, or Yahweh, Jehovah as it's translated, or as it's simply known as the Lord in Christian traditions, it's all been inverted. If it's all been inverted, then that means well-meaning people or good Christian people are unknowingly worshipping a sand demon. And that'd make a lot of things in the world make sense right now in regards to why it is like it is. Now, have I gone off topic there? Because that was kind of the road that looking at those demons took me.
No, because I was going to bring that in anyway. People tend to think of these things in terms of an actual physical demon, but it's an archetypal power force, which is central to paganism when you think about it. And yeah, absolutely, Lucifer is a pagan Greco-Roman god that ended up becoming, a devil. Same with Baal and Molech, and of course we know that Hymen was almost certainly a Semitic god by the Proto-Arabic people in the Middle East. And the movie Hereditary made him seem like this terrifying entity. Now, of course, I mean, a lot of these things are neutral at the point of zero, in that you can actually how you choose to use them. I absolutely do believe that they're nearly all pagan gods or pagan folkloric entities that have been reimagined as demons. I've absolutely no doubt about that in many of the cases. And a good book to go along with the Lesser Key, if you reviewed it on here, is The Secrets of the Magical Grimoires by Aaron Letitch. And this is almost like a Cliff Notes or a working book to help you understand this stuff a bit better. And he doesn't only go through the Lesser Key, he also goes through the Enochian stuff as well. And it's a very interesting book that goes along with it. So a lot of the arcane language, and even the 1904 version by Mathers, is quite arcane, because I first started to look into this when I read Conway's Magica Primer, which talks about how to create the seals on the copper and things like this, or different metals, tin, and so on. And I then, he describes that in a very matter-of-fact way. But when you go even to the MacGregor's Matthew Crowley version, it's still quite arcane or something. So, I mean, I can only imagine what the original was like in Latin, when that was what that was like. So, hats off to MacGregor's Matters for actually being able to translate that. But yeah, I mean, again, people like the 666 thing in the movie review, they see things in literal ways. They don't understand the power of a force. Like, for instance, you look at Lovecraftian magic. Does Cthulhu exist? Probably not. He probably could manifest in sort of like physical ways, like the bloop thing that happened in the Southern Pacific at the Point Nemo. But there's a power force there that can actually be called upon. Same with Beelzebub. Same with all, Baal, Beelzebub, Hymen, Asmodeus, Azathoth, all of them have specific energies about them that can be very useful in encapsulating as drivers within the psychic consciousness. That's really, it's not that it's we are the ones who develop the magic power. We use them as power forces, and that's why they call them keys. Keys or legends or drivers of this unleashing of otherwise untapped forces of will inside us. That's just how people should approach these things. Not like, Beelzebub is going to appear in the living room and take it off the hell or something like that. It's not like that, but you will have physical, manifestations and stuff like that. But a lot of that has to do with you creating them in your own, resolving this power into a form you can understand. But I mean, it's a colossal subject, and it goes back so far. I mean, the pentagram is allegedly given to Solomon by the Archangel Michael. Now that creates a spectacularly ancient lineage, that goes and it brings in things like, and even African magic, via the Queen of Sheba and stuff like that. And this is why by the time we got to the 17th century, it it was almost like all these streams of esoteric thought, Greek, Roman, Gnostic, Christian, Jewish, Arabic, all were coming and coming and coming and coming together, and then they fermented or solidified in this one book, and then from that point on became the go-to book for basically the entire Western esoteric thing, and lots of things tie into it. You have the tarot, astrology, all the magical workings, all that stuff. The whole Western esoteric tradition is kind of like spooled out of that, and along with the Enochian stuff.
When you look at the list of the 72 demons, and I've got a handful of them from the list here, you see that they don't really seem all that bad or unreasonable, and they've actually got lots of knowledge and wisdom that they're willing to share with the magus doing the ritual. And if you look at them as archetypes, then they are very useful keys. You've got King Baal, the first demon, who's associated with the power of invisibility and wisdom. Duke Agares, who can cause earthquakes, but he's skilled in languages. Prince Vasaggio, who provides information about the past, present, and future. The Marquis Samenia, can't pronounce that.
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah, he's got the ability to summon the souls of those who have drowned, and I mentioned that in the first topic. That was the one I couldn't think of. President Marbus, he heals diseases and can transform people into different shapes. Duke Valelfor deals with matters of thievery and possesses knowledge of secrets. You've got the Marquis Ammon, who reveals all things past and present, and he procures love. There's Duke Barbatos, gives understanding of animals, speaks of the past, and imparts his wisdom. And then we've got King Paimon, who bestows knowledge and gives dignities. And this one's my particular favourite, President Bauer. He appears when the sun is in Sagittarius, and he teaches natural and moral philosophy, logic, and the virtues of all herbs and plants that cure all diseases, especially of men, and he gives good familiars. What's the problem with that?
You see, it's what we're dealing with is the prohibitions on magic and sorceries in the Old Testament.
Just one more here. Prince Sitri, he induces love and creates romantic relationships. They all sound, they got the dark side and the light side, but they all sound pretty, decent, to learn from if you use them as archetypes and keys.
And if you look at the anamorphic and zoomorphic illustrations of them that were created much later on, Some of them are adorable, like really cute elves and mixtures of like cats and people and stuff like that. They're almost like enchanting characters. And so we're supposed to live in terror of these things that are like actually quite endearing and quite helpful in attaining higher human experiences, only because of the prohibition on magic and sorceries in the Old Testament. So, I mean, if you go onto anywhere online about this, any YouTube video about it, half the comments are by people saying, "Oh, don't mess with that. You should never go near that." They're terrified of it. It's like a 666 thing again. Ignorance is and could be again one more thing like the 666 number 13 that the profane are deliberately made frightened of, lest they use it for their own elevation in life. It's almost like, oh, I never go do that before. Oh, that's all bad. So you never get anywhere in life. And then you're getting, like all the rich and all I call them, all the powers that be, they all use magic and they're all billionaires. Do you not think there might be a helpful, it's something in that? Do you not think there's a clue there you could follow? And so that to me is always like something I always think about. Is the bad reputation away? Well, we know like this is a long held thing in magic. It's an almost certainty that Crowley sat down with Gerald Gardner and wrote the Wiccan Road. Read that's absolutely almost certain. In fact, even later on they basically admitted it, and that was done to keep all the lunatics out of Thelema and Western magic by giving them a bullshit thing called Wicca that didn't work. And why? Because, well, they knew when the English witchcraft laws were being dropped that everyone would be rushing into learning magic and wanting magic books. So they created this magical school of Wicca that doesn't work, you know.
I wanted to bring something else in. Is this anything to do with what people are witnessing and seeing at the moment? Which makes me wonder, are these things that people are seeing at the moment, are they just going about their business? Are Solomonic demons coming through, or at the very least being seen through the night vision? But the question is, are these things going about their own business while sharing the same space, but they've accidentally come into view? Or are these things actually here for something?
I definitely think there's something to that. We could have a situation where they're there all the time. In fact, if you look at the Talmud, the Talmud literally exists in a world where demons are everywhere. You get that so much from Ivor Bashevis Singer's novels. That literally they live in the drawers, they live in your socks. They're surrounded by millions of them. So in Talmudic tradition, they're everywhere. We just don't see them. If we could see them, we'd know what they were. Is it a case of this technology, like these sort of night vision and visioning, and binoculars and telescopes and sights and cameras are actually able to pick up what you needed to resolve using surgery, like the Aris Almeida in previous times to bring in, sorry, the Liturgio Goetia, in order to bring into manifestation? Is it bypassing the amplification of the nervous system and making these things visible through technology rather than through the magical ritual? Yes, very possible. I mean, that thing, whatever it is, that jellyfish thing, I hate that name. It's an awful name for it. But that thing that was at first I thought that was a bit of bird shit on the camera, but it's not. That thing changes contrast and as it moves, and it moves in a way that's outside our space time. And it also, I was looking at it, if you pan at that camera, that was a camera panning, it would not move like that. It would move very differently. And the camera is following it, like it's followed in the same, because it locks into things and follows them. So that thing that has a camera panning is not true. So we saw it with the Tic Tac UFOs, which are probably, I mean, the Christians right now, there's a big deal going on right now in in Christianity, and it's really taken off, is that the UFOs are demons. Well, guess what? I think the Christians are finally getting something right. I think they're actually probably correct in this, that they're seeing these entities, and they're being, and they've always been that. I mean, the work of Jacques Vallée has nothing been nothing but that. and they seem to be guiding forces of our culture and stuff like that. So yeah, I think you're right. I think you're actually onto something there. It's a difficult one to prove, but we are living in a very peculiar time, and we're experiencing things that no other people have experienced in terms of the all the other oppressions and all the other periods of history in the past, whether wars, famines, and everything else. They were all very much products of or in alignment with natural law. We now live in an age, because of technology, transhumanism, the internet, and so on, where medical science, where we can the secret unknowns can create a false reality of a kind of a gaslighted anti-natural law paradigm that's managed to survive by means of technology. So maybe this technology, CERN, I've been watching some stuff on that Rendlesham Forest thing that also related that was a very strange experience that related to the Marconi scientists that were all murdered in the 1980s. And one of the scientists who was murdered told his wife that he's working on something that's unscientific, meaning esoteric or, paranormal or something like that. And yeah, I'm open to all that stuff, and I think we all should be too.
I've been a lot of mutual friends recently as well who've been feeling quite uneasy after dark. They've been commenting about it on Facebook, and I've been closing the curtains when I go to bed because I've had a weird feeling that something's going on or that things are walking about in the darkness with a job to do that's none of my business. But it's a creepy feeling, but I listened to it and started shutting the curtains.
Because the reality is so strange, it's also why so many of us are locked in now and don't really want to go out unless we absolutely have to. And it's not because of anything else, it's because it's almost like this is our magic circle we're safe in. And I mean, I was working on the ditches at the back of my property there, and behind them is an old forest, small, very small. And then beyond that, a desolate bogland. That's one of the reasons I moved here, is because I knew they'd never developed the bogland behind me. And in the all the years I've lived here, for the first time on the edge of that bog, I got an uneasy feeling. I went right back into the house. And I've been out there in pitch black in darkness. I've done rituals at early morning in the summer, and and there's a well down there. There was a witch who used to live in this house, and I live absolutely on a crossroads, and I never ever had a bad feeling until last week in the back, and I was at the edge of the edge of the ditch beyond the little woods, and then the desolate bogland beyond that. And it was the first time I ever said this, I've got the creeps now, and that's never happened to me. And that's all to do with this, like what's ever going on in the world right now. And I even mentioned that Facebook thread that I'm reminded of this Lovecraft's The Dunwich Horror, where it all begins with the strange noises and presences in the hills behind Dunwich, in the woods. And our friends have been saying that from Italy to England to Ireland.
Yeah, I the same as you. I don't want to go in the garden after when it's dark now, and that's not like me. I used to like sitting out there with a coffee, looking up at the stars. I don't want to be out there anymore. And even in the middle of the night, don't want to get up and go for a pee. Just don't want to. I want to go back to sleep, and whatever it is, I don't want anything to do with it. And it's almost like this, whatever it is, has got this like Sandman quality about it, because you kind of get, this is nothing to do with you, go back to sleep, and you just turn over and go back to sleep.
Yeah, if any of you in the comments are having these experiences as well, remember the comments of this show are as much a database and a research thing as anything else we do. Let us know, because quite a few of us are having this sort of like, it's like the movie The Witch, where the woodland beyond has suddenly, we're starting to see it in almost the way the family saw the woods in that film, The Witch. It's almost like that. So if you're having these feelings, like suddenly you're closing your windows, your curtains at night when you used to leave them open, or are refraining from going too deep into woods you used to go in, or places like that, let us know, because this could be part of what's ever happening now. Like, to me, reality And especially, like, I wrote an article about that jellyfish thing. And reality seems, and I don't mean this in a paranoid way, I'm afraid or anything, sinister and malevolent to me right now. I don't know whether it's that to do with the sudden unexpectedlies, all the other stuff surrounding the Britney Spears concert, the aftermath, the wickedness of the world, the mess, the strangeness of reality. But I feel like I'm a monk in exile at the moment. That's how I feel.
And not only that, what you've said, but when you do have to go out into the great outdoors or into shops and places like that, I don't know about anybody else, but I'm finding myself having altercations with people who are rubbing me up the wrong way, and it's almost as if they're not doing it on purpose, but it's being done on purpose to send me away, to get me away and go back home.
Oh, absolutely. I've had those. I've been doing a lot of grocery shopping lately, and not, for someone else. And I've had those experiences myself that I don't like being around. People seem very uh, almost predatory, but I hate to say that word, subconsciously in my face, that kind of way. Yeah, there's a lot of truth to that. Well, that was the Lesser Key of Solomon, and like everything else in the show, it went off into other tangents, which is supposed to. And that's what makes Hocus Pocus special. If you are interested in the Lesser Key of Solomon, I'd pick it up and give it a read. It's pretty cool, and it's pretty interesting, especially after how Sarah described it. They're not really evil. They're actually probably just either folkloric elements from the past or pagan gods that were kind of demonized, literally, because of prohibitions in the Bible on magic. But there's a lot to be gained from it as well in terms of there's almost like a Western Tantra element of it, particularly in the self-help parts, and even the parts of creating the seals and creating the wax tablets create a sense of discipline. Always something that's very, and again, that's that's part of the final chapter as well. So the Lesser Key of Solomon is a book that has an incredibly complex, enormous history that brings us to the first publication or the first drafting by an anonymous author in the mid-1600s that we know the MacGregor's Mattress Crowley one. But what I will say is, give it a go, have a read, have an open mind, and I bet you'll be surprised.
Remnants of a forgotten era, a ghostly presence. Greatstone in Kent. On a waterlogged gravel pit are the haunting sound mirrors, colossal concrete structures designed to capture the whispers of distant sound waves, the echoes across time, echoes of war, transporting us to a world where the secrets of the skies were laid bare. Conceived in the early 20th century by Dr. William Sansom Tucker, the sound mirrors were a visionary response to the looming threat of aerial attacks during World War I. Stretching across the shingle beaches of Greatstone, these enigmatic structures function as colossal ears, poised to catch the faintest hum of approaching aircraft. The design, in our modern gaze, is steeped in hauntological intrigue, creating an otherworldly atmosphere where time seems disjointed or suspended and the air resonates with the ghost notes of the past. The mirrors themselves are architectural marvels, carefully positioned to harness the power of sound waves. Each mirror, with its curved surface, focuses incoming sound waves onto a central point where a microphone captures the amplified signal. This innovative technology, though crude by today's standards, was a testament to the ingenuity of an era grappling with aerial threat, the unforeseen challenges of modern warfare. As the sun sets over the windswept landscape, the sound mirrors cast long shadows, murmuring tales of a time when the air trembled with anticipation. The haunting beauty of Great Stone sound mirrors is not only their physical form, but also in the ethereal reverberations they once captured. The distant hum of engines, the roar of propellers, and the ominous drone of impending danger. Now, in their subtle guardianship, the sound mirrors of Great Stone stand as uncanny monuments, urging us to listen to the echoes of history. As we stand amidst these weathered giants, the boundary between past and present blurs. We find ourselves enveloped in the melancholic grasp of a time now faded.
Well, folks, it's time for the first psychic weather report of 2024. Are we in the middle of a Renfield tornado, or is it plain sailing ahead? He's polished up his trusty barometer and he's ready to give us that long-awaited psychic weather. That sounded much better in rehearsal. That didn't sound good. His psychic weather report. It's Thomas.
Well, the psychic weather report this week is not too different than Sarah's psychic hygiene report. There's really not a lot happening, except that it's the natural cycle of the post-Yule Christmas period. There always seems to be a general malaise or kind of not let down, but like lethargy, a psychic lethargy that happens in this period. Our ancestors would have went into literally hibernation mode, or like our European, Northern European ancestors. They literally would have locked themselves in their long houses or their circular, homes, and stayed there until near the spring, and at least until the snow thawed or the ice thawed, with their animals, and they would sat around the fire all the time in almost complete darkness, except for the fire. What light might come through the door when it's open. And they would tell stories, they would invoke legends, they would speak of heroes, and they would fill their minds with imagination. Well, that's happening to me at the moment. I had the lethargy there for a few days. So this is one of these psychic weathers that there isn't much to report, except what's happening to me. Well, maybe it could be happening to you. And that is that I've suddenly kind of now got a creative spark. It's gone from like that sort of post Yule Christmas malaise, and now I'm starting to feel buzzing, but in a kind of an introspective kind of way, to get something creative done and to work on the mind and work on the soul and work on things as they are. So I think looking around at the lack of activity on social media in particular, I reckon a lot of you are probably in a similar kind of position. and that's a psychic weather report this week, out of the malaise and into the introspection and the creativity.
Feel totally the same after the big Yuletide episode that we did. I was just fit for nothing, didn't feel like doing anything. And now I've come out the other side of it and we've got this new look show. The proof is in the pudding.
So now we come to the book section. And Sarah wasn't properly prepared this week, but I made her. And I said, woman, dig into the archives, you will find something. And apparently she has found something. And so, Sarah, what's your book recommendation, review, whatever, this week?
Okay, yeah, he's right. I sent him a message about half an hour before we were due to start the show, saying I've not done a book review, I haven't had time. But I pulled something out and I just happened to look up on my shelves and there it was singing to me. And my book review this week is actually a set of tarot cards and a book. And it is The Beginner's Guide to Tarot by Juliet Sharman Burke. And the Sharman Kazili deck and its book is a deck that was inspired partly by the imagery of the Rider-Waite deck, which we know was created in 1900 by Pamela Coleman Smith and the occultist Arthur Waite. And this deck has taken some of its imagery from the earlier decks, such as the Visconti Sforza, as well as the Waite deck, and it's put them both together and could come up with this deck. And the book starts by looking at the minor suits and gives a little bit of history of the suits and how they're versions of our modern day playing cards, such as the hearts, the clubs, spades and diamonds. And in this deck, the Sharman Kazeli deck, there's a particular colour and specific symbol used in the imagery of each suit, linking each one visually with its element of earth, fire, air and water. And the deck is quite easy for beginners to get used to. And there's also an astrological dimension to the cards, which gives it some extra depth to the interpretations. And at the end of each analysis of each suit in the book, there's a 5-card spread using that suit to help the beginner get used to a combination of the card related to that suit. And the book recommends that you practice doing readings with a single suit before moving on to the major arcana. And then it goes on to the Fool's Journey and the trials and tribulations and all the joys found on that journey. And it just lays down a personal and spiritual worldview. And on each card, which I'll show you in a second, the book details the symbolism, very detailed on each card, with arrows pointing to them so that you can learn what the hidden symbols mean in the cards. And I like this book and this set because it's really easy to learn from. And I still go back to it now and again just to get some extra insights. Just hold the book there. You can see there, it just goes into great detail. It's this that interests me, the symbolism more than anything. And if you can get the symbolism into your head when you see the card, then reading them becomes much easier. And yeah, the cards are a little bit more cartoon-like than the Rider-Waite, but they're a nice set. They're not bad at all. So yeah, it's just a old set of cards that I had that were lying around, and I didn't prepare for a book review this week, so you've got tarot set and accompanying book.
No, that was a good one. That was a useful one. That's I've seen that deck around. It's very colourful, and that company produces lots of interesting decks as well. I think they produced the Wildwood deck and a few others with the book. Yeah, it's more kind of comic book illustrative than the Rider-Waite. I like that one. That's pretty cool. Yeah, no, it's very theatrical, this deck. I have seen it.
It's not too dissimilar to the Rider-Waite, so it's easy to learn from because the Rider-Waite is the best one. to learn from. So you see it, and yeah, very nice.
Yeah, that's beautiful in The Hermit.
Yeah, highly recommended if you're just starting out on your tarot journey.
My book this week is Eclipse, the Celestial Phenomena Which Has Changed the Course of History by Duncan Steele. This book here. Now, this book is all about the effect that it's written by a scientist at the University of Salford in England, not far from where you are. And it's all about the effects that the eclipse has, not only in terms of it being an astrological effect, but also its effect upon human consciousness, human behavior, the course of history, everybody from the Macedonian world of Alexander all the way through everything from like possible use of eclipses to predict the future. So it was a way of controlling the masses. And going right back to Babylon, 700 BC, we have the earliest records of eclipses. Eclipses are also very good ways to establish the historical records are true or not, because it's a perfect clock of the heavens. Now, I'll just put my glasses on because I have to read. I'll read it back to you. Since the dawn, Satanic, yeah. Since I got this thing on here. I look like one of the people in the apartment building in Rosemary's Baby. The guys that were one of them. That actually would be a dream come true if I was rich. Since the dawn of time, eclipses have been perceived as peculiarly portentous events, whether they were seen as signs of divine displeasure or auguries of good fortune. A great deal was at stake when it came to predicting what next might occur. Stonehenge may have been built for this very purpose. Maybe that's a very 60s thing. And all ancient civilizations set great store by keeping accurate records of these celestial shadows. Such extraordinary phenomena hold a powerful fascination for us even today. And here Duncan Steele explains everything you will ever need to know about eclipses, their science and their significance to humankind. This fascinating epic story, people with characters such as Julius Caesar, William Shakespeare, Christopher Columbus, and Albert Einstein, stretches from ancient Babylon to the present day and beyond. Everything you need to know on the subject, according to the Good Book Guide. Yes, it's a mainstream book. It doesn't matter. We like mainstream books too if they're good. And it deals with, if you're interested in eclipses, and also talk things I didn't know, that the moon actually changes the rotational speed very slightly of the Earth, so it actually changes time. I didn't know that until I read this book. And they noticed by measuring the Earth's rotation according to distant quasars. Very interesting. If you're interested in astronomy, there's a lot of interesting stuff inside this as a hobby, or as a science. But it's got some illustrations in it, not over the top, and it talks about not only solar and lunar eclipses, but also other planets passing in front of the sun that have been observed, and the effects the effect on the chromosphere. Everything, right back to ancient Greece, how it was affected societies of both religion, everything else, wars, the lot, and the fears, but also the wonder that they induced in people. The whole mystery of how the moon and the earth the moon and the distance from the Earth is absolutely perfect in order to make a solar eclipse, which is a magical thing. Now, he doesn't say that in here because he's a scientist, but it's still just an incredible thing to ponder. So it's a very readable book, even though it's written by an academic. It's very enjoyable. I enjoyed it very much. It was one of those great ones to read on the train going to work. And I highly recommend it. That's Eclipse, the Celestial Phenomena, which has changed the course of history by Duncan Steele.
Nice. Does he talk about future eclipses as well, or just the ones that have passed?
Well, no, he shows how they're cyclical, so they'll all project into the future. So he's showing the power of the ancient wizards and priests had, who actually worked out. I think it's called a Saurus, Saros. It's almost like the prediction. They're like tables, prediction tables and they showed the signs of how they were able to work out when the next eclipse would come, and then later on where it would actually plot across the Earth as the Earth moved and the sun moved. No, it's some interesting shit in here. I found it very interesting. I learned an awful lot about it, and yeah, I mean, yeah, very readable. A good A good book for your 40th library that gives you science that you need to know. And I also think the artwork and the graphic design is beautiful on it. Isn't that lovely?
Yeah.
Look at that.
Yeah.
Isn't that lovely?
Yeah, I like that. Yeah.
Love that font. And then you have the Source chart behind it, and then you have this Victorian illustration of people in a park. I think it's Hyde Park in London looking at the eclipse.
Well, we've come to the end of another show, and we hope you enjoyed it, and we hope you like the new look. And thank you as always for watching. Please like and subscribe if you haven't already so you don't miss a future episode, and please share us far and wide. Now, I've got some important news regarding the show. As you can appreciate, the editing and post-production on this new look takes quite a bit of time for me to do. And as I'm a firm believer in quality over quantity, Hocus Focus will now grace your screens every fortnight instead of every week. And not only will that help in my post-production work, but it'll also give Thomas and me time to focus on our other commitments, such as writing and making videos for our respective channels. So please don't think Hocus Focus is going away.
And you're not losing out, because on the Sunday night, the same time in between, you're going to get a VON on Beyond Room 313. So no matter what, your Sunday night will still be safe for high strangeness. It'll either be Hocus Focus or the Velocity of Now. What more could you ask for?
And prior to, contrary to rumours going around, Thomas and I have not fallen out.
Yet.
It's only January.
Yes. A year. You know something, I was just thinking about being a year anniversary there the other day. And gosh, it seems an awful lot longer than a year.
I had a look at the first episode and I was watching it like that. I was like, oh my God, I had the terrible light and I had the panda eyes because I had the wrong light, and it was new to me. It was a new experience. And I remember we talked about Deepak Chopra. What the hell happened to Deepak Chopra? That was the main topic. And the Mothman.
You did great. No, there's no problem there. We all have to learn somehow. And Rome wasn't built in a day. And you did fine. I didn't see any problem with how it went. It just seems that because of the 24 shows or whatever it was we did, or I don't know how many, well, how many shows have we done?
We did 23, I think it was, on the first season, and then we took the summer off. Yeah. And then we came back after the Mysterious Earth in September. We're up to about episode 19 now, 20.
So, it does seem like this show has been going on a lot longer than a year. Yeah. I think because we packed so much information into that first year. I mean, maybe at some point down the road, an episode guide might be needed, that we can make a PDF so people can actually reference with the things we did, so they can go back and look at an episode. It'll probably help us too. We'll forget what books we reviewed and everything. Yeah. So, but yeah. It's I'm very excited about it. I haven't seen the new format, so I'm looking forward to it with the multicam format. And yeah, I think it's a good idea, because you're going to be doing an awful lot more editing to make it look a lot better, and so I will carry the week in between with the Vaughn, and the Vaughns are going to be similar to the ones you've heard in recent times. They'll do with esoteric, high strangeness, Forteana, and hauntology. So, in occasionally throwing in the current state of things. But yeah, so we'll be getting that done in the year. So as we finish up our first year as Hocus Focus, what's the tarot card, Sarah?
Well, the tarot is the Hermit. It's the Rider-Waite Hermit here, not the other one. Yeah. And it's the perfect card for the current season, continuing on with the themes of solitude and introspection. And to me, this card embodies the still and reflected energy of winter and makes me think about the deep wisdom that's associated with figures like Kronos or Father Time. And the Hermit's a lone figure in his journey on the card. And he draws his strength from his staff, which is a symbol of self-reliance. And his lantern is used as a compass. And within it, a star of inner guidance illuminates his path. And his downward gaze shows that he's seeking inner wisdom rather than relying on external sources. And the star holds a dual representation It serves as the divine light within, accessible through introspection, and it can also be interpreted as Lucifer, providing that clarity that emerges from looking inward. And the hermit might appear lost in the snowy wilderness on the card, but this isolation shows the necessity of intentional solitude rather than a sense of loneliness. A period of being alone shows that this solitude is a beautiful opportunity for introspection and self-discovery. In the Fool's Journey, the hermit comes after the Strength card, suggesting that the fool has matured and become wiser, and he's about midway through the journey as shown by the number 10 card of the Wheel of Fortune, and the appearance of the hermit shows a transition from the initial phase of the Fool's Journey, which was centered around the material aspects, which are shown in cards 1 to 10, to the commencement of the second half, which now emphasises the spiritual side of life from cards 11 to 21. And regarding numerology, the card is the 9th card in the deck, and through its number, it's connected to the moon card, which is number 18, and breaking down 18 into its components, the sum of 1 and 8 equals 9, the hermit marks the end of the first half of the journey, focused on the material, and the beginning of the spiritual. And Kabbalistically, the card is represented by the letter Yod, signifying both hand and prudence, and it's positioned on the tree of life, is on the 10th pathway between the Chesed and the Tifereth. And this card suggests it's time to consider a departure from the ordinary and go for a period of solitude, a nice quiet retreat to process thoughts and emotions. And you might be thinking of connecting with mentors or teachers at this time. And if you are, that's great, but it's also important to see that the answers lie within you, showing the importance of self-reliance and self-trust. And also the hermit carries a healing dimension, whether it pertains to your own self-healing journey or extending that healing energy to others. The overall message of this card is to live quietly for a while, where your time is dedicated to connecting with your inner wisdom and getting clarity on things. Kind of echoes the psychic hygiene and the psychic weather, really.
Yeah, the synchronicities are flying, and you even mentioned the moon there. And also the hermit card is associated with Odin or Wotan, who's walking among the world of men, not interfering, not doing anything but observing and taking note of humanity, as a god. And people over the centuries have often claimed to have seen Odin or Wotan in the woods or in the forest. And I don't know anyone personally who has, but I do believe those stories of people encountering, Odin, or seeing him in the distance walking along a path or on a beach or something. So there's a very strong Odinic force in that card as well. You mentioned that it's the beginning of the spiritual, also the feminine part of the tarot as well. He's the Senex, the wise man who's individuated himself, and he comes from strength, and that's fortitude. And now he has the inner strength to go deep into himself. And in the Odin thing too, we will come eventually to the Hanged Man, which is him on the Yggdrasil tree, proving that the tarot is bloody amazing because its meaning and archetypes literally never stop.
No, and I much prefer the tarot for meanings and archetypes than divination, using them as keys, like we talked about before in the Lesser Key of Solomon.
Yeah, well, that's to me, it's like, I said there last week, and someone made a meme of it. It's like having Carl Jung in your pocket.
And we will see you guys on the 4th of February for the next Hocus Focus on the Wuthering Nights channel. And don't forget, next week on Beyond Room 313, it will be another episode of VON.
It will indeed. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Ginger fairies.